Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto was in ANBU Black Ops, Part 5. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created many playlists, check it out in the channel. So let's start the video. Inoichi was seething on the inside as he watched the demon boy approach the gates. The fact that his daughter had left on a mission while he himself had been away on one had made him very scared and angry. He had been frightened for his daughter ever since he had found out that the blonde demon boy had been assigned to her team. He had not tried to kill the boy since that time all those years ago because he knew he had been lucky to get away with it once. The blonde boy had the Hokage fooled that he wasn't evil, but the Yamanaka clan head knew better. He had not warned his daughter about the boy for two reasons. The first was that he knew his daughter, and if he told her not to do something you could be sure she would do the opposite. The second was so as not to cast suspicion on himself for what he was about to do. He was glad that he had thought to add a tracking seal, which his Nara friend had made for him, into the lining of his daughter's bag. This would only work because he was a master of his clan techniques, including one his daughter had never even heard of. The Shintenshun no Jutsu. Mind-body switch sniper technique. It was on a whole other level from the regular form of mind transfer. With greater range and speed, it was far more dangerous than the lower-level jutsu. Its weakness was that it took significant time to prepare by the user, who needed to remain stationary. Any movement would cause it to fail. The tracking seal had allowed him to know when his daughter was returning home, meaning he had the time he needed to prepare. The perfect time to attack came when Naruto was standing still while the Chunin guard checked his papers. As expected, the guard took his time because of who it was, though because the boy was with his Jounin sensei nothing was actually said. Inoichi formed a seal with his hands and muttered the words to himself on a rooftop hidden 30 meters away. Shintenshun no Jutsu. Mind-body switch sniper technique with remarkable speed. The Jounin's soul flew towards the blonde boy. Kurenai watched as Naruto collapsed onto the ground. There had been no sign of it coming. Naruto's eyes had simply closed and he'd fallen like a puppet with the strings cut. Naruto. There was no sign that the boy had heard anything. Naruto's teammates, Sensei, and Haku, watched on in shock. For a moment no one knew what to do. Gathering herself, Kurenai quickly picked up the blonde boy and made immediately for the hospital. Any other worries the team may have had about their return left their minds. Inoichi knew something had gone wrong with the technique the moment that he opened his eyes to something he had never thought to see again in his lifetime. The sandy-haired Jounin looked up and up to the towering figure of a beast before him. The beast grinned evilly as it turned, though at first surprised, pleased that the much tinier figure had appeared in its cage. Yamanaka Inoichi. Welcome to me humble abode. Roaring laughter filled the Konoha ninja's ears. Seeing the laughing figure of the Kyuubi no Kitsune above him, dread penetrated him to the marrow of his bones. Behind him was a large set of bars. He backed up to them and tried to step through one of the gaps, but a blue light flickered into existence. He was repelled forcibly back towards the monster to fall roughly to the floor. What scared Inoichi more than the loud and terrible laughter was the silence when it suddenly stopped. All he could hear were loud deep breaths, and he looked up. The fox was no longer grinning, and its eyes narrowed. You have tried to kill my vessel for the second time. I will not let you live to try again. Inoichi saw Kyuubi's tail coming, but despite its size it moved with great speed. It struck him before he could react, throwing him into one of the bars. Something inside him cracked, and he winced. He had to wonder if his technique worked, as it usually did. Was his body receiving this damage? He had a horrible suspicion. Naruto opened his eyes to familiar sores and instinctively felt something was wrong. With no hesitation the blonde sprinted along the corridor as fast as he could, kicking up millions of tiny murky water droplets as he moved. He ran straight into Kyuubi's prison room and his eyes took everything in. He had automatically heightened all his senses without even meaning to. He saw two figures he had hoped never to see again. Inoichi Yamanaka looked the same as the day Naruto had seen him last, but there was a difference. This time the Yamanaka clan head was the one in trouble. Naruto didn't consider why the Yamanaka had appeared inside Kyuubi's prison, rather than in the halls, or how he had gotten here at all. He didn't slow his step as he ran straight into the cage, just as a massive paw rushed towards the Yamanaka, who lay on the floor. Inoichi just lay in pain and could do nothing as the massive paw came towards him. He didn't even realize that he and the beast were no longer alone. When the paw was only a few feet from hitting him, a figure came between him and his impending death. Rasengan. A shining blue light was revealed as the figure put his right hand above and in front of him, his left hand supporting his right. Naruto was forcing as much of his chakra as he could into his body as the paw hit. Even so, he fell to one knee, but he didn't take his eyes off the target. The Rasengan began to eat into the padded foot of the monster. He saw that the damage was superficial as the beast howled in anger and raised its paw. The small wound, which the powerful technique had created, was already healing. The part of his brain that was not acting on instinct made a mental connection. Naruto realized now the technique that Inoichi had used released the Shintention. Now, he hadn't been hurt when he had last been released from here, but he didn't know if it was the same for the invading soul when mixing such a technique into a situation. Inoichi just stared as Naruto turned for a moment to face him. Only one thing was going through his mind. Naruto saved his life. Kyuubi put its healed paw back on the ground. It glared at the boy who contained him. He knew that he couldn't kill the boy here. Thanks to the Yamanaka, both he and the boy would perish if he tried, but that didn't mean he couldn't hurt him. Naruto took his eyes off the beast when Inoichi failed to do anything. Now, Inoichi's mind finally caught on, and he formed the correct seal. Kai. Nothing happened. Kai. Still nothing. Naruto's eyes widened. It's not W. He was cut off when a titanic paw struck him hard in the side, sending the boy flying. He hit the floor with a thump some distance away from trapped Yamanaka. Kurenai was nearly at the hospital when Naruto suddenly coughed up blood. A large bruise appeared on his face and his lip formed a large cut. What the hell is going on? Luckily, the bruise was already beginning to heal. The Jounin entered the hospital and ran straight past the reception, straight to the emergency department. Naruto shook his dazed head. He pushed himself off the ground and looked up at the demon, which had now turned its attention back to the Yamanaka. Inoichi saw what he was worryingly identified with as a smile on the beast's face. He was sure whatever made the Nine Tails happy would not bode well for him. He did his best to ignore the searing pain in his chest and back. He used chakra to support himself as he pushed himself to his feet. You like torture, don't you? I wonder how long that will remain your opinion. Inoichi saw the massive jaws come towards him, but when they closed in on him, he realized that he wasn't going to die yet. It was little comfort as massive incisors clamped down on his right leg. He felt the bones in his leg crack and shatter in several places. When the jaw lifted up, the limb was bent and bleeding in several places. The Yamanaka fell back down to the ground, screaming. Naruto had his arms back and his head down as he ran as fast as he could. He charged wind chakra into his hand and leapt towards Kyuubi's house-sized muzzle. Kyuubi felt a searing pain down its face as a cut appeared across it. The cut was shallow to the fox, but it hurt nonetheless. Its eyes focused on the figure that was already back flipping away. Though the wound was nothing to the beast, it was beginning to get angrier. You are lucky that I cannot kill you in here, boy. Naruto landed beside a heavily injured man and looked the beast in the eyes. Fuck you. He grabbed the man and pulled him towards the bars, clearly planning an escape. The demon had other ideas, however, and a claw came down. Naruto didn't have time to do anything. His shoulder was pierced by the surprisingly sharp and small point of the massive claw. He hissed slightly, but otherwise ignored the pain as the claw hit his shoulder bone. As the animal's appendage lifted, he looked at the other ninja. The other man had not been so lucky. The claw had deeply penetrated his chest. As Ino's father took a breath and he could actually hear a hissing sound from his now punctured lung. Naruto glanced at the fox but carried on pulling the man, ignoring his yelp of pain. Just as the paw came towards him again, he passed through the bars with a blue shimmer. This time the man made it through. The blonde didn't realize at that moment this act consumed a large amount of his chakra. Naruto looked down at the man, who looked in a bad way. The problem was that he didn't know how to get out of here. A massive body slammed against the bars, but rather than angry shouting, laughter erupted from the other side of the bars. A pair of glowing red eyes looked down at the pair. Fool. Trying to save one who tried to kill you. No matter. He will not survive. Naruto didn't even bother responding as he looked around him, thinking hard. Inoichi was in so much pain. He couldn't believe he was still conscious, but amazingly enough that wasn't what bothered him most. He looked up at Naruto. Naruto. Naruto looked down at the man. Don't speak. You're too weak. Inoichi managed a wry smile. The beast is right, Naruto, I'm dead. Don't say. Naruto got no further when a hand grabbed his arm in a vice-like grip. I did an evil thing. I cannot even ask forgiveness. I thought you were it. He glanced at the once again dark cage. Apparently they were of no further interest to the fox. When Naruto started to speak, the man's grip tightened. I was wrong despite what I did to you. You tried to save me, you're a good person, don't forget that, Naruto. Inoichi's breathing became labored and his eyes began to lose focus. Before Naruto could say anything, the Yamanaka's body became too weak to maintain the technique and the world around him went black. Akiko was trying to heal the wound on Naruto's shoulder, also trying to force down her rising panic. The wound was now only 2 inches in diameter, rather than the 5 it had been. She didn't know what was happening, but as long as her son was alright she didn't care. She just wanted her son to survive. This was certainly not how she had envisaged seeing her son once he had come back from his first real mission. Abruptly Naruto took a deep breath in and sat upright. He looked around to see where he was. Inoichi. Naruto ignored the protests of his mother as he got himself out of bed. Apparently there were other injuries and he limped slightly as he moved across the room to a pale-looking Ino. Akiko was even more confused now, not to mention worried. Naruto-kun, what are you doing? Naruto turned to the pink-haired medic and surprised Ino by picking the Yamanaka up in a bridal style. Inoichi is dying. He ran to and jumped straight through the window. The 3rd floor window. Ino's mind was reeling at what Naruto had just said, but, as with everything Naruto said, she trusted it as the truth. Sure, she had hated what her father had done, but she didn't want him to die. She closed her eyes in panic as she and Naruto smashed through the window and began to fall. She opened her eyes only when she felt their movement stop with a jolt and heard a grunt. Naruto only paused to recover for a moment and sped off once more, back to where he had entered the village. He knew that the technique which had been used wasn't the same as the one Ino could use, but the man would have to be somewhere nearby. His passenger remained silent as Naruto heightened his hearing. In only a minute he was nearly at the entrance and could make out ragged breathing amongst the other sounds of the village. He continued to run in that direction. When he was about to hit the wall of a building, he jumped and the bottom of his feet stuck to the wall. He ran right up the side, with Ino secure in his arms, even as blood came fast out of the wound on his shoulder. Naruto jumped onto the roof and his fears were realized. There lying in a growing pool of blood was Ino's father. Ino jumped from Naruto's arms as he let go and she ran towards him. Naruto still got there first. The blonde boy went straight to the chest wound and his hands turned green as chakra began to pour from his hands. Ino took her father's head in her lap, ignoring the blood, and tears began to fall. As tears hit her father's face his eyes flickered a few times and opened. Inoichi looked up at his daughter, his special little girl. He always called her his little angel, and that is what she looked like now. Ino, I'm so sorry I did something terrible. Ino shook her head. Tausen, don't speak, you need your strength. Inoichi just gave her a smile. His lips are a worrying blue. It wasn't Naruto. He tried to save me from Kyuubi, even after what I did. His voice was getting weaker, but he managed to turn his head slightly to the blonde boy who was trying desperately to treat him. You can stop, it's over. Naruto scowled, but didn't take his attention away from the massive chest wound. It was proving beyond him. He wasn't very good at regenerating blood, and the wound was too large. He was heavily injured as well, but he was not ready to give up. It isn't over yet. He concentrated harder, and his hands flared as more chakra came forth. He wondered why he seemed to have less chakra than he should, unknowing about the barrier around Kyuubi. Inoichi felt guiltier than ever. The boy he had tried to kill twice, who he really had thought was a demon, was trying to save him. That meant, when he had thought he'd been tormenting a deserving demon all those years ago, he had been torturing an innocent 4-year-old child. Naruto, I have no right be, but please take care of Ino. Though the Jounin knew Ino would still have her mother, she would need support from her friends and teammates. Naruto scowled. You can take care of her yourself. Just stop talking. The wound on his shoulder was beginning to become a problem. Because he was using so much chakra elsewhere, his wound had stopped healing and he was getting dizzy. Just hold on. The Jounin's wound was getting smaller, but the blood loss was still significant and the man's body temperature had dropped heavily. Ino looked down at her father. She wasn't kidding herself as to what was happening. "Tausen, I love you." Inoichi's hand began to rise, but he couldn't lift it. Ino took it and pulled it to her. His hand was deathly cold, but he managed to squeeze hers gently. "I love you too. Tell your mother I love her, and I'm sorry, so sorry." The man's eyes closed as his hand went limp. Naruto felt the man's life leaving him. No. He continued to push chakra into his hands, but it was flickering and unsteady. Ino looked down at her father's form sadly. She looked at Naruto, who was struggling so hard to save him, even though he was himself gravely ill. "And Naruto, he's gone." Just saying it hurt her, but there was nothing anyone could do. "Stop." Naruto didn't have much choice when the green chakra flared and died. "Ino, I'm so..." He couldn't finish as he fell onto his side, unconscious. Ino panicked that she was going to lose two close people, but Akiko appeared moments later. She had seen the direction Naruto had gone, but it had taken her this long to catch up. Akiko only needed one look at the scene to understand some of what had happened. Ino's father had died. She ran to her son's side. He was suffering chakra exhaustion, and the wound on his shoulder was healing at a much slower rate than it usually would. She applied some of her own chakra to the wound and watched as it began to slowly close. She glanced at the girl nearby, who was looking at her father, and glanced up at the pink-haired medic. Akiko nodded, letting her know that Naruto would be okay. Ino stroked the cold face of her father. Tausen, she didn't know what else to do or say. Yamanaka Inoichi's funeral had many in attendance. Yamanaka's, Akimichi's, Nara's, various clan heads, and their respective heirs had come to pay their respects to the fallen man. Those present included Inuzuka Tsume and Hana, Hyuga Hiashi, and Hinata. The Hyuga heiress was holding her platinum blonde friend's shoulders. The tears that fell were silent, but painful nonetheless. It surprised many that Haddock Naruto was in attendance. Despite Ino's doubts, her mother had known nothing of her husband's deeds. They had tried to withhold the truth, but the woman had been able to detect a deceit. The truth could not be held from her, and the whole story had been given to her. Ino's mother had been distraught that her deceased beloved had been capable of such a thing. It made his passing so much more painful because she could never ask him why he did such a thing. What had been his misguided reasoning? Ino's mother needed to know Naruto forgave her husband. She would not be able to come to terms with her husband's death if his memory was marred in such a way. Naruto, who had seen the regret in the man's eyes as he died, found that it was surprisingly easy to forgive him for his heinous actions. It was so much harder to be angry with someone who was no longer living. The official story was that Yamanaka had suffered a brain hemorrhage, a delayed injury from a previous mission that had gone undetected. It was not unbelievable, considering the man had been very much on active duty. The clan head's body had been fixed up to support the story. Naruto found it strange. Of all people to be comforting Ino's mother, it was he that held her shoulders as she wept. Grief was a peculiar and harsh thing indeed. The Hokage stood in front of the collected group, standing on the green grass of the Yamanaka memorial site. The Hokage had already seen to it that Inoichi's name was added to the memorial stone, since it had been an injury received during service to his village that had caused his death. So it was believed. I think Inoichi would be glad to see so many of his friends and peers here to say farewell. The Hokage made a short but heartfelt speech on the Yamanaka clan head. There were nods and smiles throughout the group at appropriate moments. Ino's mother knew she would be unable to speak, but Ino stepped up to the small stand beside the closed casket. She stood before the group, looking out at the crowd. She had all the words written down that she wanted to say. The words caught in her throat, and a sob came forth. She clamped down on it, but knew that she wouldn't be able to talk. She was in too much turmoil. Naruto noticed that no one seemed to know what to do. Akina-san. I should have looked at Ino standing, more alone than she had ever been. The woman nodded and let Naruto go. He walked to his friend and teammate. It's okay, Ino. Ino just looked at the casket. Someone needs to say something. Her voice came out in a whisper. The Hokage had to speak at any clan head's funeral. She needed someone to speak because they wanted to honor her father. Naruto looked at the casket, then at Ino, and he let his instincts guide him. Despite the past between them, the blonde boy couldn't let this be it for the father of someone he cared for. Naruto turned to the crowd and took a breath. I didn't know Yamanaka Inoichi very well. Ino was surprised he spoke, but didn't try to stop him, and instead she leant into his shoulder. For those like me, who were unfortunate enough not to know Inoichi, then look no further than his daughter Ino. He looked down fondly at said girl. to know everything important about him. Ino looked up in surprise at this. She was too emotional to speak, but her attention was rapt, as was that of the crowd. Ask yourself this. What kind of a man could raise such a daughter? Not only beautiful, but graceful and kind. Who protects her friends and family by choosing the path in life that she has. Who is honest and doesn't hide when things get hard. Ino is a girl I am proud and honored to have as a teammate and a friend. He looked around the crowd, some of whom couldn't hide their surprise. Who Inoichi was. A strong shinobi, a respected clan head, a good friend, a dutiful husband, but most of all a loving father. For emphasis he squeezed the shoulder of the girl beside him and led her back to the front of the crowd where she stood next to her mother. Naruto was surprised when he received a kiss on the cheek. He turned to see Ino's mother with tears, both happy and sad. Sad that she had lost her husband, but glad that she could see her husband as the man he had always been as he was laid to rest. After the funeral, Hinata, Kurenai, Naruto, and Haku all walked Ino and her mother home. The two Yamanaka women entered their home holding each other for support, leaving the somber group behind. Kurenai and Hinata went one way while Haku and Naruto went another. Naruto turned towards Haku. He had not forgotten she was still feeling her own grief. How are you doing, Haku? Haku gave a tentative smile and nodded. Better, Naruto-sama. I am not the only person to feel grief. I have some perspective. Naruto understood what she was trying to say. That's good, Haku. I'm glad. He received a slightly larger smile this time. Haku turned to Naruto and stopped. I can never repay your kindness, Naruto-sama, or Kakashi-sans and Akiko-sans, for letting me stay in your home. If there is any way I can repay you, she didn't know what to say. She had nothing to offer but the gesture. Naruto looked at Haku. If you mean that in earnest, Haku, he watched her pay close attention. Call me Naruto. Your friendship is all I would ask of you. He chuckled at her expression, despite the events of the day. Unless of course you wanted to teach me those one-handed seals you do. Naruto was only joking, but Haku found herself taking the matter more seriously. She had invented a new way of doing seals, but there was no reason why someone else couldn't learn them. With advanced enough chakra control and enough determination. She knew Naruto possessed both of them in abundance. I can teach you. Naruto looked surprised. Haku, I was kidding. Haku nodded. I am aware of Naruto's Naruto, but it would be an honor to teach you, my friend. Naruto stopped any thoughts of refusing with those last two words. Haku was offering something, as a friend, and he could hardly refuse. Thank you, Haku, I'm touched. We should get home soon though, dinner will be nearly ready. Naruto was sitting down to breakfast with Haku and his parents when there was a knock on the door. I'll get it. He stood while his mother smiled and his father nodded in thanks. Haku continued to eat. She was getting more comfortable with Naruto's parents. Akiko and Kakashi were both kind people who had opened up their home to her. Like Naruto, they asked for nothing in return. Naruto opened the front door to see a messenger Chunin in front of him. The Hokage wants to see you in his office immediately, Haddock Naruto. He believed you would understand what he meant. With that, the Chunin disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto returned to the kitchen. Ajusan wants to see me. I will be back right as soon as I am done, Haku. Kasan, Tausen, I'll see you later. Naruto grabbed one final bite of food. Akiko, who was just about to leave for work anyway, got up and kissed her son on the forehead. See you later. Kakashi supposed he'd best be on his way, already an hour late to meet his team, and he hadn't been to the memorial stone yet. Tell the old man I said hello. He vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto looked at the last person, aside from himself, in the kitchen. Haku nodded farewell before the blonde boy vanished in a puff of smoke. When Naruto arrived in the Hokage office, he was surprised that there was someone else other than who he'd been expecting, Kuri-chan. He had only seen her 4 days ago, the day before the funeral, along with all his ANBU friends. The Hokage coughed. Kuri-san has asked me to witness a request she is about to make of you, though I am not aware of its nature. The brown-haired Hyuga woman stepped forward and took a scroll from a recess in her outfit. I have something important I would like you to do for me, Naruto-kun. It is no small thing. Naruto's response was automatic. Anything, Kuri-chan, you know that. After recent events, he appreciated his friends and family more than ever. Despite her serious feelings, the Hyuga woman smiled. I expected no less from you, Naruto-kun. Kuri turned towards the Hokage. If you will bear with me, Hokage-sama." She turned once more to Naruto. "When we last met, you told me that you had become friends with your teammates who more or less know the extent of your abilities, and you admitted feeling a familial bond with them." Naruto wasn't sure where this was going. The Hokage behind his desk patiently took a long puff on his pipe. "Yes. Very few people know this." She hesitated a moment. "I am Hinata's aunt." Kuri saw Naruto's stunned expression. Indeed, Hinata herself does not know. Her mother, Harumi, was my half-sister through our father. Even though we were half-sisters, we were as close as sisters could be. As a child, I was not a typical Hyuga. I was inquisitive, energetic, and got myself into trouble on more than one occasion. Harumi was very similar to how Hinata herself is now, shy, but with a good heart. She didn't stand up for herself, which was something I did in her stead, as her big sister. The brown-haired, pale-eyed Kunoichi smiled at fond memories. But it had been decided at her birth, because our father had a good reputation in the clan, that Harumi was to marry Hiashi when she was of age. Harumi was too timid to object, but I fought against it, and that was my undoing. When Harumi had Hinata, he forbade me from seeing her, fearing my influence on his child. This wouldn't have stopped me, but he threatened that, if I risked tainting his daughter, he would make her a branch family member. I really think that he meant it. When Hanabi was born, Harumi died due to complications. A tear escaped her at the recollection. I thought then that perhaps Hiashi would want a maternal figure in his daughter's lives, but the threat remained for Hinata, and then Hanabi. Kuri was showing more emotion than Naruto had ever seen. "I lost my sister and my 2 nieces. As a result, I became more like a good cold Hyuga." She laughed bitterly. "But even that was not enough. Hiashi still kept me away." Naruto and the Hokage remained respectfully silent. "I have never been able to offer Hinata guidance or help of any kind, but when you told me how you had befriended Hinata, it filled me with hope. I went away and wrote down everything I know and could find of Hyuga clan techniques. In this scroll is sealed a further 10, which will help Hinata master what her father has given up teaching her. He thinks she is weak, but he is a fool. Someone like Hinata, she could be so strong if she is given the chance." She took Naruto's hand and placed the scroll in it. "I ask you, Naruto, to help Hinata. Train her. With your shadow clones and the training we did together, you could help her so much." She looked up from the scroll into Naruto's eyes. "But I want you to teach her more. Our clan focuses too much on our techniques, and, as you know, specialization leads to weakness. I would ask you to teach her any of your own skills that you deem suitable." She put her hand on Naruto's shoulder. "Will you help me, Naruto? Help me help Hinata?" Naruto was unable to speak for a moment. The sadness of the story and the seriousness of the moment was severe. Finally, he trusted himself. "Of course, Kuri-chan. Even if I didn't know Hinata, I would do this for you. I will train Hinata to the best of my ability." He noticed another tear run down the Kunoichi's face as she smiled with gratitude. "And I don't know when, and I don't know how, but I will make it right between the two of you, Kuri-chan. That's a promise." Kuri looked down at Naruto, who had brought back some of the light that had left her life with her little sister, and for a moment, as she embraced him, she really believed. Naruto was surprised by the intensity of the embrace. He had known Kuri for so long, and she had never shown such strong emotion as she had this day. "Kuri-chan?" The Hyuga looked up, already one step ahead of the blonde. "Just tell Hinata that a Hyuga owes you an eye debt. She'll understand and will not ask any more." She stood up straighter, more like her old self, though this didn't put Naruto at ease. "You must only tell those you have to, Naruto-kun. I trust you, but sometimes the unexpected happens. That is why I wanted Hokage-sama to witness this. If the clan finds out I passed you these documents, I need the Hokage to be able to verify I was not betraying the clan, or I will be executed." The Hokage got up. "Of course, Kuri-san. I will draw up a record immediately to be held here." The lavender-eyed woman bowed to the Hokage. She turned and tried to bow to Naruto, but a hand stopped her. Naruto smiled under his mask, but it was visible in his eyes. "You never have to bow to me, Kuri-chan. Even if I became a Hokage, I would always look up to you." He embraced a woman again, if just to see her face soften one more time. It made her look beautiful. The absence of main branch family members didn't go unnoticed for long, and soon the meeting finished. Naruto gave the Hokage a wave and was gone again in a puff of smoke, leaving the Hokage with only a large pile of paper for company. Naruto stood with Haku in front of the gates of the Hyuga compound. The blonde had decided he would start teaching Hinata right away, out of respect for Kuri's request. He decided to leave Ino in peace for now, unsure how long it would be before she could face training. One of the two guards, the one who had left with a message for the Hyuga heir, returned a short time later with 3 people. Naruto had hoped Hinata would come, but he was surprised that Ino and Kurenai were also there. Ino-chan? He remembered his manners. Hinata-chan, Kurenai-sensei. Ino managed a surprisingly cheerful smile in response. Kurenai-sensei caught me on my way to see Hinata. I was coming to see you in a short while, as well. I have a favor to ask you. Naruto wondered about the second favor to be asked of him that day. What can I do for you, Ino-chan? Ino looked at the guards, who were not even looking. She didn't want others to hear it. Shall we walk? While Haku greeted the others of the group, they began to walk towards the destination Naruto had in mind. For a moment Ino looked as if she had forgotten what she was going to ask as she stared in front of her until she turned once again to Naruto. Naruto-kun, I want you to teach me, not just train with me. Kurenai-sensei is going to continue teaching me Genjutsu. My uncle is going to train me more in my family techniques, but I would like you to teach me ninjutsu, taijutsu, and kenjutsu. I know it's a lot to ask. Of course, Ino-chan. Naruto didn't even have to think about helping his teammate. Ino gave another smile, and it warmed the blonde boy's heart that she was able to. Thank you, Naruto-kun. I would still like to explain why though. As you know, my father was the clan head, though I never mentioned it makes me heir of the clan. Naruto nearly stopped as he walked. It was entirely logical, but Naruto had never thought about it. Apparently Ino hadn't wanted people to know. The Yamanaka clan wasn't as big as the Hyuga, or as big as the Uchiha, or even the Inuzuka. Still, it was a significant role. Ino noticed his surprise. Now Tausen has she took a deep breath. My uncle is the clan head until I reach 18. I want to make my father proud and be a strong clan head when the time comes. That is why I want your help. I don't want to let the clan down. Naruto wondered how many more surprises he was going to get today. You would never let your clan down, Ino-chan, but I will help you. However, there may be someone else who could be a better teacher in taijutsu and kenjutsu. I'll have to ask her. If she does not agree, I'll do my best for you. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Ino was still emotional, and her eyes began to water until she caught herself and changed the subject. Why were you visiting Hinata anyway? Naruto had actually forgotten until he was reminded. Right, Hinata. He turned to Hinata, who was already on the other side of him. I have come across some scrolls that may help you with your training. He looked around and tried to sense if anyone was around. The scrolls contained detailed information on Hyuga techniques. Hinata gasped. Naruto-kun, how? Naruto had to trust what Kuri had told him. A Hyuga friend of mine owed me an eye debt. I am obligated to keep their identity secret. Hinata was astounded. An eye debt was an obligation a Hyuga felt when an act was done by the debtor greater than saving the life of the Hyuga, such as saving a family or to have protected the clan in some way. She didn't want to press Naruto on the matter, but was very interested in who the Hyuga was and what Naruto had done for them. You called in an eye debt for me? She was deeply touched. Naruto nodded. You're my teammate and my friend. I can't think of anything I'd rather have than the ability to help you. Naruto felt a little guilty for saying this since it made him seem better than he felt he was. I have trained with Hyuga, and I know how to fight those of your clan effectively. I was going to ask if you wanted to start today. I can begin to teach Ino at the same time, and Haku is going to be teaching me. Everyone looked intrigued by that. Kurenai thought this was an appropriate time to bring up what she wanted to, sort of jumping on the bandwagon. I think I should train you all in Genjutsu. Naruto, you are very strong, and it seems a shame to leave such a weakness, such as susceptibility to Genjutsu, unchecked. Naruto looked thoughtful for just a moment. That would be great, Kurenai-sensei. I never had the chance to learn anything but basic Genjutsu. None of the people who trained me were Genjutsu specialists, such as yourself. Thank you. This was the part Kurenai was nervous about. I was wondering if perhaps you would show me some of your ninjutsu techniques. If Naruto was surprised he had more tact than to show it. It seems we all have a lot to learn from each other. I'll see if I can convince my taijutsu and kenjutsu teacher to train Ino. Haku and Kurenai have their own styles already, and Hinata will be perfecting the gentle fist style. I think this could be good for everyone. Haku couldn't hide her interest in the person who had taught Naruto the combat skills he had used against Zabuza so effectively. Who is this teacher, Naruto? Naruto smiled. If they agree, you'll meet them soon enough. I saw them yesterday, and they didn't have any missions on for a few days. For now we're going to my favorite training ground. It's secluded away from prying eyes. The kunoichi became curious, and the group followed Naruto. 10 minutes later the 5 shinobi stood in the secluded clearing, and they could understand what attracted the blonde boy. Kurenai was here to learn, as well, but she was still the sensei. Right, you can teach Naruto today. Naruto was not entirely prepared. Well, I don't know Hinata's and Ino's affinities, we'll look into that tomorrow, so for now I'll show you an intermediate kaiten. It may prove difficult for both of you, Hinata, Ino. We'll need to work on your chakra reserves and stamina to get the most out of this in the long run, but we'll schedule everything properly tomorrow once I've spoken to my other sensei. Naruto formed seals slowly and took a deep breath. Kaiten, Gakakyu no Jutsu. Fire release. Great fireball technique, he placed his right hand to his mouth and let the breath out, and a large flame rushed from the blonde's mouth. His face was tilted up, and the flames went over the kunoichi's heads. Naruto looked at the group again. Okay, the seals were. Anko sat in her favorite food stand, the smell of dango practically making her drool. If Naruto didn't arrive soon she would have to order for him. She had dinner with Naruto at least once a week, assuming neither of them was on a mission, and they alternated between here and Naruto's favorite ramen stand. It was Naruto's turn to pay tonight, but he got off lightly, as she didn't eat anywhere near as much as he did. Hey Anko-chan, how have you been? The blonde sat down, genuinely interested despite having only seen her the previous evening. Fine, let's order. Anko tended to be grumpy when she was hungry. I'll have what you're having. Naruto didn't mind dango, but he wasn't really keen on it like Anko. Anko made the order, as if her life depended on it, and luckily it wasn't long before the food came. Naruto took a few bites of his food, the dango stick quite handy. It allowed him to easily remove his mask and take a bite before anyone saw. Though Anko had seen his face when he was younger, not even his mother had seen it for years. Have I ever thanked you Anko-chan for teaching me all these years? Out of all the ANBU gang you have taught me the most. Anko looked at Naruto with a little suspicion. You're a really good teacher, the dedication Naruto interrupted. What do you want, Naruto-kun? Anko still used the affectionate suffix, though she felt irritated. If you need something from me just ask. Don't try to be sneaky, it's annoying. Naruto realized he should have been straight from the start. He just never asked Anko anything like that which he was going to. I was wondering how you would feel about taking on a new student. Anko paused from taking a bite of her meal. No. Naruto frowned, even for Anko that was a little bit curt. Anko-chan. Naruto-kun, you've grown on me over the years, and you know well. The purple-haired kunoichi knew she shouldn't be uncomfortable being honest with him. I'm fond of you. I really enjoy teaching you, but I'm not a jounin sensei, and I'm not the sociable type. You know that. Naruto had no real argument for this. Anko-chan, I'll be honest with you. I'm asking because Ino-chan wants to be stronger and honor the memory of her father. I know it's not your responsibility to teach me, let alone anyone else, but I owe it to her, as a friend and teammate to try and get you to teach her. You are a better teacher than I can be, and I still haven't finished learning from you. That's why I'm asking for your help Anko-chan. You're the best person I know for the job. I'm asking you to help her for me. Anko looked at Naruto, who meant more to her than even he knew. Despite her aversion to getting close to others, she didn't have it in her to deny him his heartfelt request. If she doesn't take it seriously I'll drop her in a second. You have to find her a blade. Anko hated caving into people. The jounin had a real soft spot for her blonde friend, and deep down she didn't really mind. Naruto got up and gave Kunoichi a hug. I don't care how you act or what you say Anko-chan, you're a big softie. Despite her reaction, a part of Anko was pleased at the words. You had better warn her what to expect. You'll need those medic skills of yours. I'll begin teaching her the day after tomorrow. She didn't have to state where, there being really only one place she trained. Naruto nodded and smiled to himself as he sat back down. As the pair continued to eat, Naruto couldn't help but think it was a real shame that no one else got to see Anko in the same light he did. Smiling when one of your Tenketsu points was sealed was not a typical reaction, but Naruto had to reassure the shy girl in front of him. Good Hinata-chan. It had taken a lot of assurances and encouragement to get her to attack her teammate. Naruto spun chakra rapidly through his system, and the closed tenketsu swirled open again. It was actually much more painful than having them closed. Hinata, who had her blood limit activated, was stunned. "You opened it again?" Naruto's eyes showed a smile. "That's why I'm your perfect training partner. I can actually make it very hard for you to close them in the first place, but that wouldn't help you practice." Hinata was a little relieved, knowing Naruto was fine, as his clones were still with Haku, Kurenai, and Ino. She had only just begun practicing her gentle fist style, and her biggest weakness was her confidence. Naruto was helping her work through that with constant encouragement. One of Naruto's clones was learning one-handed seals, another genjutsu, and yet another was teaching Ino more ninjutsu. The next day would be different still. Anko would give her first Taijutsu lesson and perhaps introduce Kenjutsu, while Kurenai would teach Hinata Genjutsu. Naruto would practice his own techniques, meditate, and work on his stamina, which he had recently realized he took for granted. Haku worked on her own abilities, which revolved around her affinity for ice. Naruto almost felt as if he was back at ANBU HQ. He was learning so much. They only did a few D-rank missions, and with hinged Naruto clones they didn't even have to be in attendance for those. Most of his time was dedicated to improving his skills alongside his team and Haku. Another tenketsu on his forearm was closed. Hinata was hesitating less as she saw Naruto recover quickly. Naruto could really see the potential in the quiet lavender-eyed girl. Ino remembered Naruto's words of warning as she received a powerful kick to the side and was knocked back into a tree. Anko resisted the urge to smile. When she had first seen in a few hours previously, she had thought the girl was a spoilt brat, but Ino had surprised the snake-wielding Jounin with her determination. "Naruto-kun, we need your healing hands before we can continue." Ino raised herself to her feet. "Anko-sensei, she hissed when a sharp pain caught her off guard. Anko just looked at her new student. "Don't try to be as tough as Naruto-kun. Even I couldn't take the damage he does. Besides, I'm still teaching Naruto after 7 years. Don't rush it." Her voice was stern, but not unkind. Ino nodded thanks as Naruto came over from his group of clones and began to scan her side. It took him only a moment to locate the injury and begin healing it. "Just a fracture, it's already healed." Naruto took his hands away from his teammate's side. "How's that feeling?" Ino moved herself a little. "A little tender, but I'm fine." She was already taking the stance Anko had taught her several hours earlier. She was exhausted, but determined to continue. Anko nodded approval. "Get ready." As Ino dodged the Jounin, who was only moving a fraction of her full speed, Ino realized that the injuries she had received were a good way of keeping her motivated. Naruto was once again surrounded by his clones, which were currently experimenting some more with his wind affinity. The group of shinobi quickly settled into a routine. 5 days of the week they trained, as a group, everything from genjutsu to stamina training. Naruto still trained with Anko in the evenings, but it was just the two of them. Naruto pushed himself very hard on the days when his clones weren't doing mundane missions, and he continued to train after most of the team had finished. The damage he inflicted on his body was significant, especially his chakra coils, but every time he healed and was stronger afterwards. On one of the 2 days he was supposed to have off, Naruto found himself around a bathhouse. Guided by the sound of girlish giggling, Naruto soon found who he was looking for. Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya had heard that voice before and turned to see a blonde girl shrouded only in mist. His nose began to bleed. He hated himself because he knew it was a henge, but what a henge. He was disappointed when the girl disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto looked at Sannin with an amused expression. "Now that I have your attention, I want to ask you to train me. I need someone to teach me more ninjutsu. I already taught you some pretty good techniques. Why should I teach you more?" Jiraiya sounded annoyed. There were scantily clad women currently going unobserved. Naruto shrugged. "You don't appear to have a job, so I figured you'd have the time." Jiraiya sweat dropped. "Give me a good reason." Naruto hated bending his moral values, but it was for the greater good. "If you teach me once a week, beginning today, I'll leave you to peep in peace the rest of the week." Otherwise, Naruto left the sentence unfinished. Jiraiya looked thoughtful, actually glad the boy had asked him to teach him, but he had appearances to keep up. "Alright Gaki, I have just a thing to teach you. One of my personal favorites. Hari Jizo no Jutsu. Needle Guardian Technique." The name didn't give much away to the blonde, but everything that had been taught to him so far by the Sannin had been worth knowing. "Show me." The Sannin once again ignored the boy's lack of respect. Fine. 2 months later. Naruto's sword clashed against another, the blades grinding so that sparks flew. Naruto held the blade across his back, blocking the blow that had been aimed there. Even as the other blade rescinded, he felt a gentle strike to his stomach and his abdominal burned under the assault. This time the sword struck him square in the neck, but in a puff of smoke he turned into a log. His two opponents watched warily, wondering where he could be. One of them searched the area visually, while the other watched for an impending attack. When suddenly the earth beneath them exploded out in an explosion of stone and soil, they cursed themselves for neglecting that area. They both attempted to jump out the way, only to receive a powerful blow each. One blow in the side and the other in the stomach. The blonde-haired person's two opponents managed to land with surprising grace, despite the attack, and took their respective stances. The smaller of the two stood in a stance the blonde was all too familiar with, one that when landed caused him no end of trouble. Naruto held up his hand. Let's call it a day for now. We're meeting Kurenai-sensei and Anko-chan for lunch in 15 minutes. Ino looked surprised as she panted slightly. It's nearly 1 already? Naruto chuckled. Time flies when you're having fun. Ino grunted. Something like that. Though if she was to be honest, she really did like training. It helped her center herself, which was especially important to her in recent times. Hinata relaxed her stance. I am a little hungry. Her voice, though, as quiet as ever, contained no stutter at all. Naruto nodded. You both trained really well today, so lunch is on me. Ino's attitude suddenly changed. Long gone were the days of her eating next to nothing, not with the amount of energy she now expended daily. Let's go. Hinata giggled at her friend's antics, her hand covering her mouth. Naruto looked around the enclosed training area, seeing that the damage wasn't too bad today. Right. Their training finished, the group headed off towards the center of the village. 10 minutes later Naruto was drooling over the scents coming from his favorite ramen stand, and he had to stop himself before he made his mask damp. Hinata saw her two teammates' expressions. I really think we should wait for Anko-sensei and Kurenai-sensei. Naruto sighed and turned to Ayam as she appeared. How's business today? Ayam smiled playfully. I think it's about to pick up. She was not entirely joking. Her shinobi friend brought them a lot of business, even more now he was earning. Luckily only a few minutes passed before, in dual puffs of smoke, the two expected Jounin arrived. Naruto smiled at the new arrival's synchronized entrance, a sign of Kurenai's and Anko's new friendship. It had merely started with polite small talk while watching their students, but each day they talked a little more. Before long they were having real conversations, and within 2 weeks they had formed a tentative friendship, which was growing nicely. Kurenai and her companion sat down. Shall we order? Like a checkered flag going down, Naruto practically started shouting his order at the ramen stand owner, while Ino was also shouting hers at Ayam. Hinata just sat there in silence, embarrassed at her teammates. Soon everyone had their meals, though Naruto's was continuously coming, as usual. Thankfully he got a good deal from the old man for buying in bulk. They all ate in companionable silence until out of the blue Kurenai tossed some papers in front of her 3 students. Anko and I are treating you to lunch today because it's a special occasion. Naruto sticks to 18 bowls, would you? A muffled grunt was her only reply. Hinata looked down at the form and her pale eyes widened. These are. Anko grinned. Genin aren't usually nominated for a few more days, but I pulled from strings. Kurenai turned to the other Jounin. Anko just shrugged in feigned innocence. Ino developed a small smile at the idea. You both think we're ready? The 2 women nodded, and Anko stopped mid-bite. She didn't like ramen as much as dango anyway. You brats have progressed well in the last 2 months. Ino rolled her eyes. It's trying to keep up with Naruto. It's a Kunoichi pride thing. Naruto's face remained blank as the Kunoichi just laughed at his expression. Ino raised an eyebrow in the other blonde's direction. What about you, Naruto-kun? Are you finally going to show everyone what you're made of? Naruto was thinking as Kurenai answered for him. I think Naruto is going to surprise a few people. He won't be able to hold back so much and still make Chunin. She noticed a serious look in Naruto's eyes. He had known he couldn't hide himself from the village forever and make progress in his career as a shinobi, but it was still daunting. You need to sign these and return them to admin within 3 days. Let's fill them in now. Ino could barely contain her excitement. Naruto looked around. Has anyone got a pen? Silence was his response. Kurenai-sensei. Ino turned to her suddenly red-faced instructor. Naruto and his team were walking on the familiar road to the admin building, which was attached to the back of the Hokage Tower. They walked in comfortable silence, but before they were halfway to their destination they happened to see a familiar pink-haired figure. Naruto waved casually at his cousin, having not spoken to her for a few days now. He only spent one day a week not training, and he was usually resting on that day. He visited friends and family when he could. Sakura waved a little vaguely to her cousin, and Naruto correctly guessed it was due to one particularly broody raven-haired shinobi. "Hi Naruto-kun, Ino Pig, Hinata." Ino gave a mild glare. Forehead. Though their greetings were predictable, the jibes lacked their former venom, as if it was a habit more than anything now. Mostly because Ino seemed to have halted in her pursuit of the Uchiha. Naruto looked up when he saw a box-shaped rock moving. Gaki. He spoke to the figure that was surely in the barely disguised box. When the rumor had gone around the village that Naruto had defeated the infamous demon of the mist, most people had disregarded it. When the Hokage's grandson had asked the old man if it was true, he had confirmed it, for his own reasons. Since then Naruto had been a hero worshipped by the boy and his two friends. The box burst into a cloud of smoke, and there came 3 sets of coughing. Too much explosive. Naruto knelt down. A rock isn't square, Gaki. He really was trying to give the boy good advice, which the boy of course ignored. He didn't really mind, since he was a good enough kid. The boy turned to Naruto and looked at the 3 girls around him. He gave a grin. "Are they yours?" He held up his little finger. "I can understand these 2. He pointed to Ino and Hinata. But why a girl with such a large forehead? It was only a moment before the boy suddenly sensed danger. Ino laughed, while Hinata looked worried and Sakura looked ready to kill. "What did you say?" Sakura was fuming. Naruto frowned at the scene before him, fearing for the Hokage's grandson. "Run." Konohamaru didn't need telling twice, as he dashed off. However, as he disappeared around the corner there was a thump. Sakura now felt a little bad, even if still annoyed, and headed around the corner. She was soon followed by everyone else. "That hurts." A voice spoke in an unfriendly tone. Konohamaru felt himself being picked up, and he looked into an unfriendly face. "That hurt, you little piece of crap." Beside the black-clad ninja that was holding the Hokage's grandson stood a tall kunoichi with light sandy hair split into 4 parts and wearing non-matching net tights. Naruto was distracted for some reason, and it took a moment for her words to sink in. "Don't, we'll get yelled at later." Kunoichi sounded bored, barely looking at her companion. The Hokage's grandson found his usual bravado had left him. Naruto Inayasan. His use of this term for the blonde showed the boy's rising panic. Naruto didn't know if Konohamaru was in real trouble, but he was obviously scared. "Put him down." His voice was calm. "Let's play a little before the boss comes." The black-clad ninja ignored the blonde. Naruto frowned under his mask. He couldn't do anything well, and Kurenai had pretty much said he couldn't keep his secret forever. Naruto formed seals, but oddly at the end of the sequence he slammed his palm into a small leather bracelet on his wrist and pierced his skin on a sharp stud. Kawarimi no Jutsu. Kankuro was suddenly no longer holding the little boy he had been, but a larger blonde boy by the neck. This wouldn't have worried him, but the blonde boy was holding an 8-foot-long sword to his neck with impressive stillness. The Sand Shinobi quickly let go. Tamari watched the blonde boy in grudging awe. The young blonde held his sword effortlessly with one hand. The large weapon must have weighed 4 times what her fan did, which she could not wield with such ease, even though she used 2 hands. Naruto looked at the ninja in front of him and then at his forehead protector. "Sand Shinobi, you must be here for the Chunin exams. You are a guest in the Leaf, and you will behave as such." Tamari was once again surprised, but this time at the boy's restraint. The blonde clearly could have taken her brother apart at that moment, though whether he could in a full-blown battle remained to be seen. She generally had a low opinion of Konoha ninja, but this boy looked younger than her youngest brother, yet stronger than herself or her brother beside her. She looked into his bright blue eyes, which turned to her, and she found she could not look away. It was clear the boy was intelligent and his confidence absolute. He was, as if tempered by fire. All this she saw from one look. The sword swung away, as did the blonde's gaze from the kunoichi. He slammed his hand, which was holding the large weapon, into his wrist, and the sword disappeared. "Besides, I don't think your companion is pleased." Gaara's eyes widened ever so slightly, and he abandoned what he was going to say to his brother as he stood under the branch of a tree. Naruto noticed the girl, and the black-clad boy visibly began to shake, as in a swirl of sand the red-haired boy appeared in front of Naruto. "Who are you?" Naruto observed the Redeed's expression, the look in his disturbing eyes, the odd tattoo on his head, and the way he held himself casually intimating. The other ninja didn't answer and just looked into the blue eyes of the stranger before him. The atmosphere changed as Gaara began leaking out killing intent, watching for the blonde's response. Naruto just continued to stare at the redeeded sand nin. With his arms crossed, he looked into pale green eyes. The killing intent simply washed over him, even as it grew. Temari was shivering under the pressure of her brother's foul intent. She looked at her other brother to see he was faring no better. The three other females were not suffering as badly as herself as they looked at the blonde. Apparently his presence was powerfully strengthening, and she too looked at the masked ninja. In her shock, almost forgot her own fear. The blonde boy just stood there and returned her brother's gaze, his body perfectly steady, with no fear in his features. She had never met anybody that had been able to simply dismiss her brother's killing intent as if it was nothing, and her fear grew once again. She was afraid of this boy. Naruto was worried for the others and decided enough was enough. He flared his own intent from nothing to match that of his opponent for a mere fraction of a second. The breath left Temari, Kankuro, and the other Konoha nin, but Gaara's intent suddenly stopped. There were 5 sharp intakes of breath as relief swept over Ino, Hinata, Sakura, and the 2 other sand nin. Gaara spoke in his usual, almost dead voice. "I am Gaara of the desert. These 2 are Kankuro and Temari. You are?" "Naruto." Naruto kept his tone blank. He didn't like this boy at all. Gaara nodded. "Interesting." He glanced at his siblings. "Let's go." Without argument, the group left. As they left, Temari and Kankuro saw the glint in Gaara's eye. It was one that they recognized. Gaara had found someone he wanted to kill. Naruto looked around. It looked as if no one had seen the ordeal, and Konohamaru had long since fled. He didn't look thoroughly, however, otherwise he would have seen a pair of onyx eyes staring at him from within the foliage of a distant tree. Sasuke was stunned, and he had to wonder if the rumors about Naruto had been true. He had disregarded the rumor immediately that the dobe had supposedly killed an A-class nuke nin when he had heard it. Even up here, the 2 boys' killing intent had affected him. "Naruto, who are you?" After checking she was all right, Naruto left a shaken Sakura continuing on her way as he and his team went to hand in their forms. Ino patted Naruto on the shoulder. "Thanks." Hinata beside her nodded. Naruto was still winding down from the encounter with the sand nins. He had a bad feeling about Gaara. Something was not right about him, something about the killing intent he had emitted seemed almost familiar. Ino and Hinata were nervous as they walked into the examination building. It didn't help that they were running late thanks to Konohamaru, who had been very grateful for Naruto's help with the sand nin the previous day. They ran up the stairs until they got to the 3rd floor and quickly entered the room labeled 301. Inside they saw numerous genin also in the room. Sakura waved at the members of Team 8, while Sasuke just glared at Naruto for his own reasons. A loud voice became audible within moments. "Hey Baka, you really think you're ready for this?" Kiba's comment was aimed at Naruto. Ino couldn't help but snort at this comment, which caught the Inuzuka's attention. Inuzuka turned and growled at the blonde girl. "What are you laughing at, Ino?" Ino just shook her head innocently. Nothing. She then walked to him with a smile on her lips. Not everyone. She moved her face closer to the dog boy. "Can be as strong." She fluttered her eyelashes, and the Inuzuka gulped. He may not like the Yamanaka girl very much, but he could not deny her looks. And as handsome as you, Kiba-kun. She looked down timidly at her feet, with her hands behind her back. Kiba was too shocked for words and stood there, his mouth agape. He wasn't the only one. Sakura's, Shikamaru's, and Choji's jaws had also dropped. Ino looked up again with a completely different, more sinister smile. "Yeah, right, dog breath." She smacked the Inuzuka in the side of the head, hard, sending him to the floor. "Insult Naruto-kun again, and I'll put both you and your dog down." She casually turned away and walked back over to Naruto. Kiba weakly stood up. He wouldn't admit it, but the blow had really hurt. He felt a little dizzy, but he made a show about pretending he was fine. Ino saw the cocky look on Inuzuka's face and wished she hadn't gone easy on him. She shook her head to force herself to stop thinking about it, lest she lose focus. Naruto looked at his blonde teammate with amusement and fondness. He didn't care what the Inuzuka boy said, but it was nice that she had defended him anyway. He turned back to the room and watched a gray-haired shinobi move across the room towards the group. "You guys are rookies just out of the academy, right?" He looked at the rookie 9. "This isn't a picnic, you know." Nearby, Sasuke responded first with a cold tone. "Who do you think you are?" The gray-haired ninja looked unfazed. "I'm Kabuto." Naruto ignored what the man was saying. He was being too helpful considering there was a chance they would be opponents at some point in the exams. He reeled his thoughts in again when the gray-haired genin mentioned something. "I'll share some info with you cute rookies with these nin info cards." The genin with the cards explained their working while he knelt to the ground. Sasuke stepped forward. "What have you got on Haddock Naruto and Gaara of the Desert?" The cards were quickly sorted and one came up first. "Haddock Naruto." "That's you right?" Naruto didn't respond. He didn't want his card read out, but taking it would reveal the very thing he was trying to hide. Mission history: 17 completed D rank, 1 complete C rank, while 1 completed A rank, and, as a genin too. It is rumored on his team's C-turned-A rank mission, he killed A rank nuke Nin Mamachi Zabuza, Aka the demon of the mist. Everyone, except his teammates and Sakura, turned to stare at Naruto. There were some confused looks, even though some of them had heard the rumor they had quickly forgotten it. Finally, Kiba snorted. "Your cards must be wrong. Naruto here was our class's dobe, there's no way he could have done that." The tension was dispelled as most of the rookies seemingly came to their senses. Kabuto just shrugged while Naruto felt relief. "Gaara of the Desert, 1 year older than you guys. Mission history: 8 C rank and 1 B rank, another high flyer. Apparently he has returned from each mission without a scratch." Naruto phased the suspicious ninja's voice out again as he thought about the boy named Gaara. The information he had just heard, if accurate, confirmed that there was something unusual about the boy. Something Naruto was sure wasn't a good thing. When, a few moments later, Naruto sensed an attack coming, it only took a moment for him to realize it wasn't directed at him. He watched the sound ninja attack and the gray-haired ninja dodge. He noted the attack used sound waves to perforate the eardrum and damage the inner ear canal. His medical knowledge led him to that conclusion after seeing the victim's reaction as he fell to the floor and vomited. In a puff of smoke, the first examiner appeared in front of the exam proctors and foul language was immediate. "Quiet down, you worthless bastards." Naruto smirked under his mask as Ibiki introduced himself and berated the sound ninja. He'd only seen the man in passing, but he was instantly recognizable from description alone. Naruto casually took a seat while his teammates and rest of the rookies did the same. As the rules of the exam were explained, Naruto had to admit the exam sounded oddly simple until he turned over the test paper. Even he would struggle with these questions, and that was saying something. Naruto discreetly counted the number of genin in the room as everyone was still reading the paper. The number sitting the exam was not exactly divisible by 3. This led him to the conclusion that there were planted agents in with the examinees, no doubt with the correct answers. He glanced at his teammates and saw, with some pride, that they appeared to have figured it out. Hinata had activated her bloodline, while Ino was waiting for Sakura to write the answers down before she took over her body. Had she been able to use her family jutsu on Naruto, she could have gotten him to write down the right answers. Naruto looked around the room and observed the others cheating, while he simply answered everything he could. He managed about 2/3 of the questions and wondered if he should risk leaving it at that. He decided not to risk it, but before he thought of a way to cheat, he saw Hinata glance at him to catch his attention. He saw her cover her mouth as if in thought and, guessing her plan, he sent chakra to his ears as Hinata spoke to him. "Naruto-kun, cough if you can hear me." Hinata whispered into her hand. Naruto gave a gentle cough, as if simply clearing his throat, and held his pen ready. Hinata was pleased Naruto had caught on. "My answer for question 1 is." Naruto amended and added answers on his paper as his lavender-eyed teammate spoke. He looked around, and sure enough, none of the examiners noticed anything. The 10th question was unanswerable, as it was to be given at the end of the test. Naruto saw Sakura seemingly collapse when he had finished with his paper, but he wasn't worried. When she woke up, she had a familiar grin, though it was one he usually saw on another face. Naruto knew Sakura would be furious if she found out what happened, but he certainly wasn't going to say anything. The fox boy looked around as several genin were ejected from the exam. Some of the cheaters' methods were ingenious, such as a kunoichi using mirrors. He watched the brown-haired girl, who was wearing a Chinese-style dress with her hair in 2 buns, for a while. He was convinced he simply found her methods interesting. Tenten finished giving answers to her teammate when she noticed someone staring at her. She returned his gaze, and he glanced up at the mirror she was using and smiled, subtly informing her that he was impressed. Tenten just scowled back at him. She was here to become a chunin, not to impress boys, but the boy just shrugged her response off. The end of the test came soon enough, and Ibiki's face was harsh as he began to explain the rules of the 10th question. You have to decide if you want to take the question or not. There were outbursts, but nothing that worried the veteran jounin. The sand kunoichi was the loudest and caught everyone's attention. Naruto turned in his seat and looked at the sand kunoichi. Now he took the time to notice, he saw she was carrying an impressively sized fan. He imagined it was for wind-based attacks, but wondered how she used it. He decided if the chance came up he would ask her about it, since he was also a wind user. As she sat down, Naruto realized he should probably stop staring. He watched as several people gave up, forcing their teammates to leave as well. It was only when Naruto noticed his pink-haired cousin shift, as if she was about to raise her hand, that he decided he must do something. Yo Ibiki. Nice poker face. Tenten was stunned by the boy who had been staring at her earlier. She had seen that even her pale-eyed teammate seemed intimidated by the examiner. This boy either had a steel-like constitution or he was an idiot. Judging by his earlier staring, she assumed the latter, but she couldn't deny the effect he had on the group. Ibiki tried not to grimace as several hands, which had been about to rise, failed to move. The atmosphere completely changed. Cursing Haddock Naruto and his cycloptic father, the jounin was forced to speak. Is everyone sure? He waited a moment. Then congratulations to you all on passing the first exam. It didn't really come as a surprise when the interrogator explained the purpose of the 10th question, and Naruto thought it was a sound idea, of course, but he didn't regret doing what he had. To have done any less would have been a betrayal of his relationship with Sakura. What did come as a surprise, though, was when mere moments later someone burst through the window and unleashed a banner as they landed. None other than his snake-wielding friend and sensei. Even as she scowled, told Ibiki off, and then further terrified the genin, he felt nothing but fond amusement. Anko was really getting into her little power trip, and he thought it was cute, but of course he'd never tell her that for fear of being flayed alive. Follow me. Anko leapt out the window, though she had arrived only minutes after her dramatic arrival. Some of the students followed her example, but most opted for the stairs. Naruto and his team took the stairs once again, not revealing anything. Soon several dozen genin were standing a short distance in front of a very high and serious-looking fence. It stretched in each direction, as far as anyone could see. The trees, which towered even above the fence, looked far from friendly. Naruto looked at his teammates and could see they seemed intimidated, but the important thing was that he could see the determination in their faces. He didn't need to worry about their resolve. Anko noticed Naruto checking on his teammates, who were now her part-time students. She had an idea and stopped her speech on the second exam, which the blonde was ignoring anyway. Naruto sensed Anko's gaze and turned to see the malicious smile on her face and the gleam in her eye. He knew something was coming. Anko unleashed a kunai at Naruto. He didn't budge, allowing it to cut his cheek. Nor did he move when Anko appeared behind him and did something unexpected, which even for her was a little extreme. She licked the blood off his cheek. Many around them shivered. Naruto would make sure the purple-haired kunoichi was aware she owed him for this little show to intimidate the examinees. When a figure crept up behind Anko and gave her back the kunai with their tongue, Naruto had to fight himself not to react. It was one thing for Anko to sneak up on him, who he trusted completely, but it was not okay for this creepy-looking grass ninja to sneak up on his sensei. Anko's smile never wavered. Thanks, but don't sneak up on me again, unless you want to die. The large tongue of the grass nin receded. Sorry, I just got excited by the sight of blood, and you cut my precious hair. The grass nin thankfully backed off. Moments later, Anko was handing out forms. There will be deaths in this test, and you must sign these so I'm not held responsible. I'll explain the exam, and you can sign the form afterwards. Simply put, you will attempt the ultimate survival test. The jounin explained the layout of the exam, the heaven and earth scrolls, the conditions, and the time limit of making it to the tower. And one more rule, you must not look inside the scroll until you enter the tower. One final piece of advice. Don't die. Naruto signed the form with a pen he had taken to carrying on his person the last couple of days. He watched as Hinata and Ino silently, but determinedly, filled out their own. They joined the queue to get their Heaven or Earth scroll, and Naruto handed in the 3 forms, acting as the unofficial team captain. As they exited the hut, Naruto was listening to those around him. He smiled under his mask when he heard Shikamaru. Nara turned to his 2 teammates. Kiba, Chaoji, this is troublesome, but we will be going after Naruto. His team is the weakest that we know of. Naruto relayed this information, and Ino wanted to take Nara right there. Don't worry Ino, let them try. They'll get a nasty surprise. If we battle you can take on Shikamaru. He noticed this seemed to pacify the platinum blonde, who smirked at the idea. Let's get to gate 16. Naruto was on alert as soon as they stepped into the dark forest. Hinata-chan, who's nearest? Byakugan. Hinata looked around with her ghostly vision, looking in the directions of both the nearest gates. There's a team from the rain 2 kilometers west of Naruto-kun where she focused hard. They have the Earth Scroll. She was pleased, since they had the Heaven Scroll. Naruto grinned under his mask. Let's get going. Hinata, you keep an eye on their course, I'll keep my ears out, and Ino be ready just in case. The 2 girls nodded and followed Naruto as he jumped into the branches of a tall tree before he made his way west. It was only a short time later that Hinata stopped. They're engaging Sakura's team Naruto-kun. What should we do? Naruto halted in his progress. He didn't want to engage Team 7 since he didn't care about the exam enough to fight his cousin, but he couldn't guarantee what Sasuke would do. Who else is near Hinata-chan? Hinata brought her focus slowly back towards their position, but after a moment she stopped. There is a lone grass 9 heading towards Team 7. She has the Earth Scroll on her. Naruto nodded. We'll go for her then. Team 7 doesn't need 2 Earth Scrolls, whichever one they have. Let's go. Ino and Hinata followed Naruto as he set off once more and turned to smile at each other. Naruto was proving to be a natural leader. The 2 Kunoichi were only too happy to follow. Hinata was still watching Team 7 from afar, so she saw that the Rain Ninja were taken apart with little trouble. The Hyuga girl was surprised to see Sakura had disabled one of the ninjas with a kunai to the leg. She and Ino weren't the only ones improving, it seemed. When the grass nin arrived in front of Team 7, Hinata was surprised that the ninja was confident enough to face off against 3 shinobi. Still, she didn't think a lot of it until the grass kunoichi swallowed her own scroll. The scroll they wanted. She relayed the information to her teammates. Naruto scowled. Something about this isn't right. He had a bad feeling, which was confirmed when moments later they arrived on the scene. They were just in time to see Sasuke, Sakura, and Shino all collapse in fear. Naruto jumped down from his location high up in the tree line and landed between his cousin's team and the grass nin. He was quickly flanked by his teammates. However, when the grass nin's eyes focused on them, the genjutsu working on Team 7 turned to Team 8. Ino and Hinata collapsed onto their knees like the others. Naruto foresaw his own death, but that was something he had faced many times before and even welcomed. He did not go down. Kai. Naruto focused his chakra sharply and shot out a pulse of chakra. He watched as the others stood up shakily. The grass nin turned her whole attention on Naruto. Interestingly, only a genjutsu master should be able to dispel that jutsu. Naruto shrugged. Whatever. Since you ate your scroll and I'm not keen on gutting you like a fish, you should leave. He wasn't about to explain about being trained by Konoha's genjutsu mistress herself. You are no ordinary prey. The grass nin hissed slightly as she finished speaking, an unpleasant smile on her already creepy face. Naruto grimaced but said nothing as he stood in expectation of battle. He was not disappointed. With her bloodline active, Hinata shouted out a warning, but he already sensed it. A large snake went straight for the blonde, who slammed his hands together twice and activated 2 seals. One on a bracelet and one on his right arm. Sakura looked up in horror. Naruto-kun. Naruto moved much faster than usual, so fast in fact that only the grass nin was able to follow his movement. Zabuza's sword came out to meet the snake, and the result was rather disgusting. The snake was in mid-air and could not stop, so its open mouth met the large sword. 2 halves of a snake slid either side of the blonde. Blood splattered him, but luckily when the snake disappeared in a puff of smoke, so did the blood. Naruto turned his gaze back to the person in front of him, and something clicked. He knew that only 2 people could summon snakes, and one of them was Anko. Orochimaru, his voice dripped with hate and contempt. He wasn't the only person aware of the presence of the snake Sannin, as elsewhere another snake wielder was looking at the melted faces of 3 recently deceased grass shinobi. Kuku, there's no point in this then, I suppose. The grass nin disgusted everyone present as she began to pull on her face. Pulling it off completely, she revealed that she was in fact a he. I suggest you run away like good prey, Naruto-kun. I have business with Sasuke-kun. Sasuke's head rose sharply. As far as he knew, he'd never met this weirdo before. Naruto just shook his head. Everyone, leave now. Forget the exam. You have to run and tell one of the examiners or proctors that the snake bastard is here. He turned around back to the Sannin. Orochimaru merely watched the scene before him with amusement. We're not going to leave you, Naruto-kun, forget it. Ino's voice was resolute, but he daren't take his eyes off the Sannin to argue. Naruto scowled. One of you has to inform somebody. After a moment, a voice called out. I'll go. Shino didn't explain his reasons. He ran off towards the gate from which his team had entered the forest. Naruto was surprised when Shuriken and Kunai came flying past him, and Sasuke dashed past him. Sasuke, you baka, wait. Naruto watched the Uchiha engage the Sannin into jutsu, but didn't dare interfere as he knew he might injure his fellow Leaf Shinobi. He ran to his teammates. Sasuke can't win this. As soon as I get the chance, I'll retrieve him. When Sasuke is out of there, I will engage Orochimaru. No one is to interfere. You 3 need to guard Sasuke. The 3 Kunoichi nodded reluctantly. Now was not the time to argue, and Naruto watched for an appropriate moment. Sasuke had given up to jutsu as his opponent effortlessly blocked all his blows. He created a large fireball and watched in satisfaction as his enemy was consumed. However, when the fire faded, the Sannin stood unscathed. Still determined, the Uchiha attacked again, seemingly for a taijutsu strike. Instead, he launched wires around his opponent and tied him to a tree. Rapidly forming seals, he focused as much chakra as he could and sent flames down the specialized steel wire. The man was burned alive. When the burning faded, the remains of the man turned to mud, revealing it had been merely a clone. Sasuke, panting, his chakra waning, just stood there stunned. This guy was out of his league, even though his own eyes were now spinning with his newly activated Sharingan. He was afraid. Naruto saw the opportunity. Kawarimi no Jutsu. He sealed his sword away. Ino, Sakura, and Hinata were no longer around Naruto. Sakura was relieved by the appearance of her teammate. Sasuke-kun. Sasuke didn't answer his fangirl. It seemed the snake guy had not even been trying. The Uchiha just sat there, feeling empty, afraid, and disgusted with himself. Naruto launched a fist at the Sannin's face, but the pale ninja moved to block it despite the blonde's newfound speed. At the last second, Naruto charged wind chakra to his hand as he opened it flat. Orochimaru's eyes widened in surprise as he moved his hand and face out the way, but not fast enough. He received a small cut across the back of his hand. The Sannin realized the boy was serious and much stronger than he appeared. But he was still nowhere near a match for himself. Naruto was already jumping out of the way when the expected retaliation came in the form of a kick to where his head had been. Naruto knew that had been his first and last easy shot. In midair, the blonde didn't expect another snake coming out when it did, larger than the first. He was reaching for his sword when it swallowed him whole. Naruto-kun. 3 figures watched on in horror. Sannin smiled evilly at the 3 girls, and his neck suddenly extended. His head made towards Sasuke, who was still frozen. Rasengan. A muffler came from behind the Sannin before the sight of the snake burst outward. The reptile disappeared in a puff of smoke. Orochimaru diverted his head and turned to watch one blue sphere fading from the blonde's hand, but his attention was on an identical blue sphere in the other hand. Naruto allowed himself to fall towards the Sannin's body, the hand with the remaining Rasengan held palm downwards. The snake Sannin's body jumped as his neck retracted. He wasn't afraid, but he was curious. You know the Rasengan. Only one person alive could have taught you that. Naruto began forming seals rapidly, ignoring his opponent's words, but he stopped when the Sannin used one of his own techniques. Futen, Datapa no Jutsu. Wind release, great breakthrough. The Sannin launched a massive blast of wind at the blonde. Even as fast as he was, Naruto knew he wasn't fast enough to dodge the attack. It was too far-reaching. The attack obscured the blonde as it neared him, but the observers saw that he didn't escape the attack and his teammates feared the worst for the second time. The attack died down, and they saw a large yellow spiked cone, which his teammates knew was made from chakra-enhanced hair. There were spikes embedded deeply into the ground. Orochimaru had actually counted on Naruto knowing this, knowing who the boy had learned from. The boy swiftly let his shield up, jumping up and back with the intention of avoiding any attack. The Sannin launched his head again, but this time towards where the blonde boy was about to be. Naruto wasn't fast enough to avoid the fangs that pierced his neck, instantly burning his flesh. Naruto fell and landed on one knee, as with a satisfied smile Orochimaru watched. "You are an interesting boy, you have potential." He stopped however when the boy's eyes flickered red for a moment before returning to blue. Naruto wasn't unconscious yet, and this told the Sannin something was wrong. "The Nine-Tails boy?" His whispered words actually contained some doubt. His seal wasn't designed for Jinchuriki, and he had no idea what it would do. Then again, the outcome might be interesting. Naruto's eyes closed in a vain effort to block out the pain. He could hear something in his head, but it sounded like something thrashing about and seemed to have no meaning. Orochimaru decided he had spent enough time here. As Hinata and Ino rushed to Naruto's side, he took the opportunity and lashed out his head once more towards the Uchiha. The raven-haired boy's neck even, as the pink-haired Kunoichi beside him attempted to intercept the attack, a kunai in her hand. Quickly retracting his head, he simply began to sink into the ground. Naruto felt the pain become too much for his body to handle and, despite his high tolerance, he passed out and fell to the ground. His teammates could only watch in wide-eyed horror. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time, till then sayonara.